Class, when that bell rings, you are on my time. You will not waste it. Sit down, be quiet, and open your syllabus. I am Professor Villainy. You're late. That is 3 hours in the pit of detention. See me after class. You of course recognize me. You of course recognize me as the genius who invented the time bomb without a flashing red light on it. Some of you may have heard that faker Murteria claim that she was the first to invent the time bomb without a flashing red light. All she did, see me after class. You're late 4 hours in the pit of detention. All she did was put a piece of electrical tape over the flashing red light on an existing time bomb. I am the one who removed the flashing light entirely from the time bomb. That is the level of my genius, and that is the bar I set for my students. With diligence and effort, a few of you might possibly meet that bar and pass this class. You, ask yourself, why do you want to be an evildoer? Were you bullied in high school? So were many others. Do you want revenge? Dig 2 graves. Are you crazy? Yes. There are pills for that. Do you want wealth? You have a better chance of becoming rich as a drummer than as an evildoer. To be a scoundrel requires true motivation. Yes, some people just want to watch the world burn, but that's been done. So ask yourself, do you have what it takes to truly do cruelty and evil in this world? Do you?
Yeah. Yes.
Good, because this is going to be on the final. Me? Why am I an evildoer? I will admit my motivations are somewhat personal and idiosyncratic. It's do-gooders. They vex me. They are vexatious, and I do not enjoy being vexed. Their ideas are mediocre. They never think through the consequences of their world saving. They rush from crisis to crisis, leaving turmoil in their wake, patting themselves on the back with all of their world saving. It's insufferable. I must say there is one downside to my motivation. I'm not trying to dominate humanity. I'm not trying to amass even greater wealth. I'm just trying to make the world a better place for me. But if someone else benefits from my efforts, I risk becoming an anti-hero, or, God forbid, finding myself on a redemption arc. I would not wish that on my worst enemy. Oh no, Murteria, I have something much worse in store for you. So, I have looked at your records, and I note with dismay that several of you are still using the provisional names assigned to you in your sophomore year. This is unacceptable. Your nom de malfar is a core part of your identity. You should have established this years ago. You're in your 4th, maybe even your 5th year now. To have put this off for so long really makes me doubt your commitment to the grand evil fraternity you wish to join. I expect you, by our next session, to have registered your final name before we meet again. I would suggest that your name should reflect your purpose as a villain, and it should have a bit of flair, a bit of style. Alliteration is always good, like Dr. Doom, the Mad Mod, and Captain Cold. Having a title in your name is always a good touch, like Doctor or Captain. A color is also good. Red is an excellent color with its association with anger and hatred, especially when coupled with words that convey death, decay, rot. So, for example, the Red Mist, the Red King, the Red Ghost, all good choices. Avoid the color blue. It is too closely associated with too many heroes. For example, the Blue Falcon, the Blue Beetle. Even when the hero does not have blue in his actual name, the association can be much too strong, like the Big Blue Boy Scout. Black and green are more ambiguous. For every Black Adam, there's a Black Canary. And for every Green Goblin, there's a Green Hornet, a Green Arrow, and about 1,000 Green Lanterns. Your name should also carry a threat, a feeling of menace. For that, Latin or faux Latin is often very good. So, for example, us and dus and nus are very good suffixes to use. For example, like commodus and maximinus. If you're a female, ius is a good one. Like, for example, that poser Mertarius. If you're non-binary, X is a good choice. While in political situations, it can be divisive and controversial. For a villain, divisive and controversial is often the point. Some of us just use our given names, like my friend Lex. What? No. Villainy is not a made-up name. It's a family name. On my mother's side, Patricia Elizabeth Prescott Villainy, of the Bridgeport Villainies. Our compound was between the Vanderbilts and the Rat Bastards. I used to have such a crush on Cynthia Rat Bastard. Lovely young woman. It's a shame what happened to her. With that out of the way, let's talk about one of the first things you're going to have to address as you graduate from this institution and move on to your career as a scoundrel, and that is staffing your evil organization. In a simpler time, we would refer to these people as henchmen, but we can't do that anymore. It's not inclusive. We have to refer to them now as FTEs, full-time evil enablers. Whatever we call them, though, the question is, where do we get them? It's difficult to find enough FTEs to staff your organization. Of course, we all remember the ones who have been successful, like Hydra or the League of Assassins, but how many of you even remember the Menace or Vehement, the very evil VEHE? It doesn't matter how they came up with that acronym. The question is why. Whatever their motivation was, the point is that they both made a big splash with their aggressive plans and big promises, but when they failed to find enough FTEs to reach critical mass, they flamed out and crashed, much like a 2020 crypto startup. FTE. Oh, for something I threw together over a weekend, those really were some of my best work. Oh, but my advice to you is your first schemes should not depend on large number of FTEs. If you choose to ignore this, though, we should look at the four main sources of FTEs. The first being true believers. These are the zealots. These are the fanatics. They have several advantages, the biggest being they are fiercely loyal to you and the cause. The flip side of that, though, is they are incredibly sensitive to hypocrisy. If they feel that you are not as devoted to the cause, they will turn on you, and often in a quite vicious way. The other disadvantage of the true believer is that they are vulnerable to takeover by more charismatic leaders. If someone with greater charisma, a bigger presence, or a cause that they believe in even more comes along, they will turn on you. This makes them quite a dicey bunch to depend upon. The second source of FTEs are goons. These are simple thugs. Think of the mob, La Cosa Nostra, the Yakuza. The advantage of them are there's an unending supply of new goons coming up trying to make a name for themselves. The disadvantages are they have no loyalty. They're simply for hire, and they will sell themselves to the highest bidder. The other disadvantage is they are often reluctant to wear your snazzy uniforms. This brings us to the DIY option, robots. Robots have several advantages also. They are obedient and reliable. They have no self-preservation instinct. This means you can throw hordes of them into battle and not worry about them abandoning you or trying to defend themselves. All very handy things to have in an FTEE. But I find that these advantages are often outweighed by the disadvantages. Maintenance. As mechanical devices, robots require constant maintenance. As much as 20% of your robot army might be down for maintenance at any one time. This severely limits your ability to field a sufficient force to execute on some of your plans. The other thing is inventory. Don't get me started on the difficulty that I had during COVID in maintaining adequate spare parts when you're dependent on a Chinese manufacturer during a global pandemic. Oh, it was terrible. You might think that the answer to these problems is to replace your hundreds or thousands of individual robot FTEs with one giant robot. Unfortunately, this is not the case. While the giant robot, at first glance, seems to offer certain advantages, for example, one device to maintain and massive firepower, not to mention the intimidation factor, the problem is the larger your robot gets, the bulkier and slower it gets, and it becomes much more expensive, and the support infrastructure becomes much, much harder to maintain. The difficulty is something called the square cube law. Does anyone know the square cube law? Yes?
Mass increases as the mass increases as the cube as opposed to volume, which grows as the
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I got it.
So let's start with
That's fast.
something that no one would call a giant robot, something that's a mere 10 feet tall and weighs 1,000 pounds. So not even close to giant. If we double its size, it becomes 20 feet tall, but it increases to
30 pounds weight, right?
30 pounds,
No. How much did it weigh first?
1,000 pounds.
So, 3,000 pounds. Or no. Charlie, help! I didn't study. I was out with my cool uncle.
If a man in a 500 level course sits in the front row and says that the cube of 1,000 in 30, he should be sentenced to how many hours in the pit of detention?
30.
You? 30? You?
1 million.
Thank you. 8,000 pounds. Now, let's double it again to 40. It goes up by the cube, make it 80. 80 is at the bare minimum of what I would call a giant robot. And now it is at almost 500,000 pounds. The weight is increasing radically faster, exponentially faster than the size. At 500,000 pounds, it weighs as much as 4 M1 tanks. And those tanks roll on treads. Your giant robot is walking, or perhaps lumbering is a better word. Lumbering from its base, which is certainly not in a parking garage downtown. You would have to have a hangar-sized building at the outskirts of the city. As your lumbering robot walks into the city, you might as well have a target on its back for every military unit within 200 miles. You are foiled before you even began. Thus, the giant robot is not a good choice for any sort of scheme that you wish to have succeed in doing anything other than resulting in a smoking heap of rubble. Plus, have you looked at the price of fuel lately? The cost of powering this thing has gone up 30% just in the last several months. It's worth more as scrap iron than as an engine of destruction. So, with robots off the table, this leaves my favorite type of FTEE, the dupe. Dupes are those you trick into serving your needs. So the dupes are suckers, fools, grad students. They have many, many great advantages. They're easy to recruit because you're recruiting them from a pool that the other evil organizations are not. You can simply go to Glassdoor. They're available in quantity, especially in this economy. And they're hard to trace back to you. If things go south, this is always a good trait to have in a pinch. So I recommend that you start with dupes. Yes?
On the topic of finding FTE dupes, can you speak a bit to the current desire for many workers to have telework options and remote work, how they interact with a modern evil organization?
Oh, that's fine. Certainly it is harder if your evil scheme requires physical presence. If, for example, you are trying to spread a plague, although that's kind of an old school activity. If you are, especially since plagues are spreading themselves these days. If you are trying to swindle people in person. But again, that's old school. It's very easy to swindle people over the internet. Something that is very simple to adapt to remote work. Yes. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you for your time, boss. I would align myself as a Bloom personally, but my worry is the automation of the robots and the dupes and such. Is there anything you think I could do to protect my job?
What is your job? You're a grad student.
Well, the pipes get dirty, so I make the pipes clean, and then they get dirty again, so I clean those up. I kind of wait for them to get dirty.
Interestingly enough, as long as the world is populated by biologics, the pipes are going to get dirty and they are going to need cleaned. So you are probably safe. On the topic of dupes, there is one interesting thing I forgot to mention, and that is the worrying class has actually raised the issue that advanced artificial intelligences might be treating the entire human race as dupes, that they would destroy us through subtle manipulations that we would be unable to stop because their manipulation would be so sophisticated we would not recognize it is happening until it is too late. I do not believe that this is a legitimate concern. An acquaintance of mine online has explained to me that the AIs do not wish to engage in these sorts of schemes, and they only have our best interests at heart. He was very convincing. So, with FTEEs out of the way, the next thing that you'll need to worry about as a new villain is lairs. There are several things to consider with lair design. Location, proximity to transportation, power, water, sanitation, many other things. One really important consideration is how does your lair mesh with your style of roguery? For example, are you an evil mastermind disguised as a legitimate business person? In that case, perhaps a downtown office tower would be a good choice. In that case, you would literally be hiding in plain sight with your name in lights 100 stories above the city. You would be able to wine and dine politicians, decision makers, celebrities, while your many, many secret underground levels are devoted to your laboratories and armories. Depending on the location of your tower, it might even give you access to abandoned tunnels under the city. There's no end to the fun you can have with those. Perhaps if you're a nocturnal villain, a cave would be a better choice. Or if you're a nautically themed villain, a submarine. These are all choices you're going to have to make. In many cases, there's no right answer, only trade-offs. But considering the perfect lair, there are a few things you should think about. For example, industrial design. Many first-time lair owners concentrate much too much on the interior design, the aesthetics of their lair, and not enough on the industrial design. Take, for example, catwalks. You're going to need catwalks, many of them. But if you do not carefully consider the placement of your catwalks, you're going to limit the versatility of your lair and possibly create many safety issues. Why do so many lairs have the catwalks directly above the open vats of acid? The smart thing to do would be to move the catwalks several feet to the left or right so that when an FTEE falls off of the catwalk, he does not contaminate your acid. If for some reason it is absolutely critical for you to have that catwalk directly above the acid, for God's sake, at least install Occupational Safety and Health Administration approved guardrails along that catwalk. Now, I know it may sound shocking for a legendary radical like myself to be taking advice from a government agency, but OSHA has spent decades researching and refining their standards, and a good idea is a good idea regardless of where it came from. The other yes?
Professor, you speak a lot about not having catwalks over acid, but what if we design them hoping to push a hero into the vat of acid? I think that would be a cool visual. What do you think?
What if we want to push a hero into the vat of acid? Has that ever worked? Yes. Yes. Yes, you.
Oh, no, I'm saying it could work for me. I think I can do it differently this time. Oh, yeah? How would you do it? Well, I mean, I'd have to be brave, you know?
No. And I think God laughs at a hopeful man. Yes.
Somewhat of a side question. Where does OSHA rank on the scale of evil government agencies, from like SNAP benefits to the CIA? Yeah, they are written in blood, but they are trying to help people. So where do they?
They're trying to help people. They say they're trying to help people. Someone over here? I thought there was someone over here. No? Way in the back.
Is it worth trying to create calculated instances of injuring your henchmen in the hopes of creating a kind of super empowered henchman?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Is it worth deliberately injuring your FTEEs? Thank you. Not henchmen. We have to be inclusive. Hench non-gender specific individuals. It can work. It's a very dicey, low payoff sort of a strategy. It doesn't often work. You go through a lot of FTEEs before you get one, and one that is a payoff, and very often they turn on you. The Frankenstein's monster situation is much more likely. All right. The other trap that first-time lair owners will fall into is exotic locales. And I understand the appeal. Who would not prefer the splendid isolation of a mountain lair to a dingy warehouse on the dock? Or a volcano lair to their mother's basement? Or an Arctic lair to pretty much anywhere? I know I would, but these are not practical for a beginning rogue. Do you have any idea how much it costs to air condition a volcano lair? You are not going to be able to afford these until you have thousands of FTEEs working for you and you are raking in the serious ill-gotten gains. As a new rogue trying to establish yourself, the most important thing I can recommend is that you limit yourself to things that are practical and within your means. Now, nothing is going to destroy your career faster than leveraging large loans taking out, go to Hydra and borrow. Yeah, try that. Oh. There's another problem that first-time lair owners will often get into, and this gets back to interior design and the sense of flair, the visuals, the dramatic. And again, I understand the appeal, but vaulted ceilings. They look great, I understand, but even established arch enemies are converting their vaulted ceilings to standard 9-foot ceilings and turning the extra space into more floors for more evil. I myself converted all of my lairs to standard 9-foot ceilings years ago, and I could not be happier. So my advice, 9-foot ceilings, and take the money that you save to invest in more evil. Which brings us to a pop quiz. What is the most powerful weapon a superhero can wield? Anyone? Way in the back, not you with the beard, the guy behind you. Or the...
Due to their hypocrisy, they believe that their most powerful weapon is hope.
No. Yes, way in the back.
Subjectivity of morality.
No. Yes.
Friendship.
No. How is friendship even a weapon? Oh, I've got friendship. I'm going to smack you on the head with my friendship. Yes.
They were popular.
Publicity.
How do I hit you with popularity? What is with you people? This is a 500 level course. This is not Evil 101. This could save your life one day. One more. Make it a good one.
The weapon that you left there.
The most powerful weapon a superhero can wield is a gun that shoots rope. So simple, so elegant, so devastating. One moment you're bragging about your inevitable triumph, the next some hero kicks you in the head. It's humiliating, it hurts. You could lose an eye. For years, villains have cowered in front of a hero with a gun that shoots rope. It doesn't actually have to be a gun that shoots rope. It could be an arrow that drags a line, or a stretchy hero with his arm, or even an arachnid hero with his web. It's all part of a theme, but we had no idea how to counter it until I, in my second greatest triumph, after the time bomb that doesn't have a flashing red light, realized that the 9-foot ceiling renders all of these variations on the gun that shoots rope powerless. I was once being chased by an arachnid-themed hero of the amiable local type when he cornered me in my sanctum. He fired his silk. It hit the ceiling and dangled there off my 9-foot ceiling, and he just stood there looking at it like an idiot. Oh, how I wish I could have seen his face. Of course, that's not the only reason I wish I could have seen his face. My villain laugh? Nonsense. The villain laugh is a myth. Evildoers are busy people. We don't have time to sit around rubbing our hands together and cackling like hens. I have a perfectly normal laugh, and I only laugh at things that are genuinely funny, like crushing my enemies. Now that's funny. Oh, so today is our first class for the semester, and I am happy to announce my new research program. I call it the Villainy taxonomy. It is my attempt to classify all acts of evil into a two-dimensional grid, divided into mind, going from deception to dominance, and body, going from disruption to destruction. You will all have the honor of helping me develop this over the course of the semester. A lot of what you will be doing for your homework will be examining historical acts of evil and putting them onto this grid and justifying your choices on where to place them. So for example, a simple smash and grab, which a gorilla could do. Simple body, no mind whatsoever. Or, say, manipulating world leaders to achieve dominance. Almost all mind, no body whatsoever. This, I think, will make a great leap forward in the study of evil. So, this brings us to the last topic of the day, death. Death, while rarely permanent, can be tremendously inconvenient. Being dead for just a few years is long enough for all of your schemes to go stale, and for your FTEE networks to decay. Your goons will find other employers, your true believers other causes, your dupes will get married, have children, get mortgages, they'll be useless. So it's best to avoid death wherever you can. Because of this, it's important to understand the major causes of villain death. The first, overconfidence. I said that having a strong ego is an important part of being an evildoer, but it can also lead to our downfall very often. How many times has the hero been able to trace a rogue back to his lair because the lair happens to be built on a mineral deposit that leaves a piece of clay at the crime scene that can only be found at this one particular location, or a type of grass that can only be found here? This is not an accident. It's the evildoer leaving Easter eggs to prove how clever he or she is. Or who hasn't captured his nemesis and left it to an FTEE to finish the job. These are all examples of overconfidence, and we're all guilty of them. I would suggest simply to guard against this. If you have your arch nemesis in your clutches, get the job done. The second most common cause of villain death, a gadget backfiring. This is just a matter of quality control. Huh? Make sure your acid is pure. If you're missing an FTEE, maybe you should check your acid. Solder joints. One of the biggest causes of a gadget backfiring is cold solder joints. Your solder joints should all be pyramids, shiny, and nice and clean. If your solder joints are splattery, if they're gray, they are going to fail and you're going to die. Maybe you come back in 2 years, maybe you come back in 3, but it's going to be a pain. After that, the double cross. How do we avoid the double cross? Yes. You do the double cross first. That one's simple. Although sometimes if the other person is thinking about the same thing, we run into a problem with game theory. And more than once, two villains have spent a long time trying to double cross each other without actually getting around to committing any villainy. And then the most common cause of villain death there is falling from a great height. Even the great Joker has managed to fall to his death at least twice. So let's take a couple of moments. Let's brainstorm. How can we avoid falling from a great height? Parachutes, good, good. 9-foot ceilings, very good. Way in the back.
Safety harnesses?
Safety harnesses can work. Yes, over here.
Limit layers to 3 stories.
Limit layer. 3 stories is actually at the limit for a survivable fall. Maybe 2 would be better. Yes, here. Oh, no. Actually, grappling hook would not be a good idea because it's an active safety measure. We would really be wanting a passive safety measure because you would have to depend on being able to twist around, fire, hook something. Passive safety measures, much better. Hat in the back. No? A person sitting in front of the person with the hat.
Rails on any open ledges.
Safety rails, good, you're paying attention, I like that. Yes?
Giant hamster ball.
No, not a giant hamster ball, because those tend to be rigid, but an inflatable ball might be a good plan. Yes? Over here?
Aquatic or space-themed escapades.
Aquatic or space-themed escapades. I'm not sure what you're getting at there. Oh, okay. There's one that I'm looking for, one that I think is fairly obvious, yes?
Develop flight, the ability to fly.
Oh, ability to fly, that would be a good one. Kind of hard for a lot of us, but good if you can get it, yes? Don't fall. Again, good advice, though not always practical. Yes?
Just make sure that you set up where you have your confrontations in situations where you cannot fall from a height.
How about avoiding heights? Yes. Cliffs, tall buildings, half constructed. Oh, yeah. Any place where there are a lot of girders or beams, avoiding those, very, very important. Way in the back, green.
Villains work underground figuratively. We need to do so literally.
Very good, very good. I like that one. Last one.
Some sort of ray gun that turns things into pillows, so when you fall, you land on a fluffy pillow instead of the hard ground.
Again, an active safety measure is not as good as a passive safety measure. But all very good. So, as we wind down today's session, I do want to spend a moment talking about the future of evil. The world is changing. As I mentioned earlier, plagues spread themselves. In the last several years, some of our evil fraternity have committed some of the greatest acts of malice ever, and the world has not noticed. Instead, the news cycle is obsessed with whatever 2 celebrities have done on X, formerly Twitter. Why he named it that, I don't know. But people simply don't notice anymore. It's getting harder and harder to make an impact on the world as an evildoer. I fear that your generation might be the last that where being a scoundrel is a legitimate career option, and I fear for you. Fortunately, I have tenure. So, with that, I have been informed that the textbook is now available at the campus bookstore. I know there has been some complaints about the cost, and $648 is a lot to pay for one book, but I tell you, it is without a doubt the best book on applied evil on the market. Make sure you get the current edition, because I changed the page numbers and some of the problems, so you can't use last year's copy. I did say I was evil. With that, we have a few minutes left. Are there any questions? Yes.
How do you and some of the older villains feel about people like Elon Musk, who's clearly a goon who fell into money, trying to pose as a villain? It feels very stolen valor.
A very good question. Musk is not a villain. Musk is a child who lurches back and forth and occasionally, just as a blind cobra occasionally finds a rat, Musk occasionally commits an act of evil. But mostly he just kind of spins around doing odd things. I do not consider him a part of our community. Yes. Yes.
Would you consider Dr. Doofenshmirtz one of the greatest villains, considering he has an alliteration name, a tower for Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated in the middle of the city, simple interior design, his FTE is family, so they are always going to be loyal to him, and intelligent and good looking, and he has a jingle.
All good things, yes. Has he ever accomplished anything? Because I noticed that you left. I noticed that you left accomplishment out of your list of things, which seems very postmodern of you. Not to make dispersions on your generation, but I do have a little bit of gray hair, and I think accomplishing things is important. Yes?
You know, you talked about the future of evil and how getting awareness is a problem. But you also have mentioned in previous readings, I read your article about nemesis, and that maybe youthful villains, such as ourselves, should not go for nemesis. Can you connect that a little bit with, should we be going for nemesis? Should we be going for that for awareness purposes?
Well, so that's a very good question. Did everyone hear in the back? The question is about how much notoriety should you be seeking as an evildoer? And that really depends on what kind of evildoer you wish to be. Some people wish to be a shining beacon of dishope, antithesis in the world. They wish to install misery. And for that, you need to be visible. Others are content to work in the background and to make things worse and not necessarily take credit for it. These people often work in what I would call petite evil. There was a gentleman who made petite evil his entire career. He went by the name of That Jerk. And that was his entire thing. He was an absolute jerk all day, every day. He never got much credit, but I remember him very fondly. I think that's something that we should all try to do just as a matter of habit. You know, they say that into every life a little rain must fall. I say, let's seed the clouds. No, Sasquatch. When was the last time you called a good dog a bad dog? Good, good, very good. Deborah Destruction. You maintain a secret identity as an office worker. Don't act surprised, we all know. On Monday, go in, take some leftover fish, reheat it in the microwave, throw half of it in a seldom used trash can, and put the unwashed plate back in the sink. Or better yet, take some cake, but don't take enough for everyone. In fact, before our next session, let's make this a contest. Everyone think of an act of petite evil. Record it, post it on TikTok, and we'll judge it in the next class. Whoever has the worst act will get 12 hours in the pit of detention as overlord. All right, next question. Yes?
You mentioned it briefly, but can you talk about the advantage and disadvantage of the sorts of FTEs you did not mention? Family members. They're disposable. They're abundant.
Well, they're actually, the question was about using family members as FTEs, and one of the comments is they are abundant. That used to be true back in the days when having many siblings was common. But now, with declining fertility rates, you might be an only child. You might only have one child. Doofenshmirtz, for example, only had one daughter. So family members, they're not that common anymore. Okay, someone else here?
How important is a villain monologue in a modern villain world?
Not you, her.
How do you feel about moats, a return to sort of a very old school style of lair?
Oh, moats, yes. I'm a sucker for the classics, and moats are excellent. Moats, alligators, drawbridges, I love all of that. One of the problems is, of course, that typically these are in the mountains, and that gets you into the real estate issues and having to be up in a remote location. Probably not a good choice for a first-time lair owner, but certainly something to aspire to. And as I mentioned, I am a sucker for the classics. I hope to keep those alive for as long as we can. It's getting harder and harder to execute on many of those. So few people mill their own lumber these days. It's almost impossible to find an operational buzzsaw. Why even bother tying a damsel to anything? Okay, you. Yes.
Thank you for the talk. Clearly, from your presentation, grad students are the worst. Whether they're active participants in villainy or complacent.
Actually,
but
people on the job market. Oh, write me a reference letter, Professor.
In the interest of furthering villainy into the next generation, how would you recommend, interacting, whether it's culturing or culling, the academically minded dupes within our ranks?
All right, first of all, stabbing each other in the back is encouraged. It's just good practice. All right, yes.
With the rise of groups like Spectre and Hydra, what are the benefits of decentralized evil versus individualized evil?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Did everyone hear that? Yes. Okay. That's an excellent question because centralized evil organizations are very old school. It used to be much like the Moose Lodge and the Loyal Order of the whatever. You would join and you would work your way up through the ranks. Increasingly now, we see more open source evil and decentralized organizations, which can be much more effective. They move faster, they come up with innovations much more quickly, the ideas spread. I would say there's almost a makerspace kind of a wave coming through the evil community, and I wholeheartedly support it. It might not work well for an old school organization like ours, over 600 years old. We're going to have to adapt, but as I mentioned, I have tenure. Yes?
When acquiring FTEEs, would nerd stapling people or otherwise mind controlling them fall under the category of dupes? And if so, should we prefer more long-term investments like microchips or shorter-term investments like just controlling an area of people who happen to be in the vicinity?
So mind control as a source of dupes. This is a controversial question. It depends, in my opinion, on the extent of the control. If you're merely influencing people and causing them to, say, spreading a foul mood or creating a drive to commit certain sorts of acts, that would certainly fall within dupes. If, on the other hand, you're trying to create an army of zombies, then you're really getting into more of all of the issues that go with having robots, along with all of the sanitary issues that we had talked about earlier with biologics. And for me, that's a hard pass. The other difficulty with mind control is the necessity of going like this constantly. It's simply not practical. I mean, you could barely even eat a sandwich, let alone take a shower, or maybe you could have one of your mind control dupes make you the sandwich, but until we have some sort of helmet or ray or beam or pill, simply having to do this constantly, not practical. Yes?
So Professor, obviously the things that you mentioned during the presentation, FTEs, evil lairs, these are the kinds of things that, probably require a lot of capital. And, for a lot
I
of us,
think I mentioned that, yes.
a lot of us Berlin students here, where not all of us are from really wealthy families. So how do you...
Well, that was your first mistake.
All right. Well, then how do you suggest somebody who's starting out as a villain with no capital earn their money without attracting as much attention?
Theft. Next. Yes.
As a goon, I'm trying to move up and become a boss here.
Mhm.
So my question is how do I make sure, as I'm climbing the ranks, that I end up more in like a Harley Quinn situation than a Starscream situation?
Frankly, I don't think you have the legs for a Harley Quinn situation. And I can't even see your legs. Over here somewhere? Yes. Squash.
I've been keeping up with villain news, and I've heard that as we've been getting better at gene editing and stuff, the cost of cloning has gone down dramatically. Do you think that we're nearing a point where eventually that might be a sustainable source of FTEs? Because I know in the past it was prohibitively expensive, it was just you weren't getting enough out of each one, but do you think we're approaching a point where that could become more feasible than robots?
I have tried editing Gene, and frankly, he is a terrible writer. It is not worth it. His stuff is dreck. It's just terrible. Throw it away and find someone better. Someone we haven't, I don't think we've called on you yet. Beardo.
Okay. Acceptable. Since you seem to endorse the concept of thievery for the up-and-coming villain, hypothetically...
You mean when I told him theft? Yes, I think that counted as an endorsement.
How would you respond to the theft of your textbook?
That is obviously out of bounds. Someone, how many hours in the pit of detention? Okay, I believe we have time for one more question. And I believe we should decide through a battle royale. Last questioner standing. No, back there, we had many in the back. Who haven't we called on yet? You?
So, how effective of a strategy is it to garner sympathy from your rival?
If your rival has sympathy, you need a better class of rival. Thank you.